Welcome to the AT Parenting Survival Podcast, where you get help and guidance through the chaos of parenting a child with anxiety or OCD. This show is for educational purposes and is not intended to replace the guidance of a qualified professional. Here's your host, child therapist, Natasha Daniels.
Well, hello there, and welcome to another episode of the AT Parenting Survival Podcast. Today, I want to talk to you about the importance of family involvement in our child's OCD. There's so many aspects that involve the family. And OCD really is a systems issue. That's one aspect of it because it involves the people around them. And it's important for us as family members to know how to help our kids with OCD and what our role is. And a lot of times, sadly, and I hope this does change over time, but that is not addressed in therapy. Even with really well-skilled OCD therapists, a lot of times the family aspect of treatment is not considered. Some amazing therapists do consider it, but it's not the norm. So I want to talk to you about what your role is, how our family involvement can improve our child's trajectory with OCD, and where to get started. But before we jump into this episode, I do want to thank NoCD for sponsoring this episode. NoCD offers affordable, effective, convenient therapy, and they're available in the U.S. and outside of the U.S. And you can schedule a free 15-minute consultation to see if NoCD is a right fit for you and your child. Just go to treatmyocd.com. That's treatmyocd.com. I'll leave a link in the show notes. Also, my memoir, Out of My Shell, is going to be released in 2 days on September 19th, 2024, depending on when you're listening to this. And to celebrate the release of my memoir, I am offering a limited time offer that you can get my social anxiety course in my online school at atparentingsurvivalschool.com. That's a $127 course. And I'm gifting it if you pre-order my book or you order my book, because in 2 days, it won't be a pre-order. It will be an order. All you have to do is purchase the book wherever you like purchasing books, whether it's on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Target, Walmart, wherever, and email us a copy of the receipt. You can email those to atparentingsurvivalhelp@yahoo.com, and we will give you a coupon code to access that course for a lifetime for free. That is only going to happen until October 1st, 2024. So if you're listening to this after October 1st, please don't send us your receipts and don't email us because it is over. I made the mistake when I was doing my OCD workbook and I had the same offer for a different course. I never gave an end date, and we have literally still been getting emails about that almost, 6 months later. So I'm not making that mistake again. All good things come to an end, and this one is included. So if you have social anxiety, or if your child has social anxiety, this is a great opportunity because I think the power of a course with the memoir and the story is extra powerful. In the memoir, I go through my childhood and my adulthood journey through social anxiety. And my hope is that, one, it's an interesting read. I love writing. This is my first published book that involved more creative writing versus all my how-to books that were directly for kids. And it's a deeply personal book, so that's scary. My hope also was that someone could read this memoir and learn through the story how to crush their own social anxiety, or that someone could read this memoir and have this deep empathy for a relative who has social anxiety, whether that's your child, your partner, or somebody else. And so I really wanted it to be this therapeutic tool that not only crafted an interesting, engaging story, but kind of passively gave you the tools without prescribing them to be able to start your own journey crushing social anxiety or to support someone with social anxiety. And so I'm hoping that that's what it's going to do. I read it and tell me what you think. But you can grab that book, and for this limited time, you can grab the social anxiety course as well, which is much more prescribed, and we'll go through the skills step by step. But the book actually uses the skills that I teach in the social anxiety course I walk you through how I was doing that in my own life. The other kind of cool thing about the book that is a little unusual for a memoir is that I start doing therapy sessions. I'm a child therapist, right? So I start doing therapy sessions with my younger selves. And I start with Miss 7, and then I go all the way up to, I think, Miss 30 something. I don't remember how old she is, or maybe Miss 40. I think it's 30 something. But I go all the way up to my current self who was writing the book. Now, I wrote the book 5 years ago. And so a lot has happened since then. But it took a while because my husband suddenly died and the book had been finished. I finished the book 7 days before he died. So it was done, and then it was just put on a shelf for a year and a half, maybe 2 years, until I came back alive and was like, oh yeah, I should probably pick that up. I put a lot of effort in working on it. I think it took me 2 years to write. And so that's like 7 years ago. So it's been a big project that is finally coming to fruition. So I hope you enjoy it. You can check it out. You can go to my website at socialanxietyreality.com. You can watch the book trailer. You can get links to go to Amazon to purchase it, or you can go wherever books are sold. If you are interested in social anxiety as well, you could go to my Instagram account just solely for social anxiety and my journey, my private journey with social anxiety, and it is called @socialanxietyreality as well. Okay, enough of that. Let's dive into OCD and talk about your involvement with OCD in your house. So I first want to talk about all the multitude of ways of how OCD involves us as family members. One, it gets us to accommodate the OCD compulsions. And so we are often involved in hearing the confessions and completing the loop, providing reassurance, even doing checking for our children, even wiping down and avoiding. And there are times where family members are literally doing compulsions by proxy, which means they're taking showers, they're washing hands, they're doing the things because their child, teen, or young adult is dictating that they do them. And so OCD doesn't stay in its lane. It gets out of its lane and tells us that we have to do things too. So that's number one, because if your child is trying to work on OCD and we continue to feed the beast that they're trying to shrink, we're obviously going to be paddling in the wrong direction. So us pulling back our involvement and detangling ourselves from the OCD is key. It's key. And a lot of times it's the first step. A lot of times our kids are not willing or able to pull back their compulsions. And the very first step is us educating ourselves about OCD and pulling back our involvement in growing the OCD. Now, sometimes we're not involved, but more often than not, we are. And the next way that it involves our family is that it creates a stressful environment. And so I talk a lot, like in the AT parenting community, my membership community, about how to create a therapeutic home environment. What does that look like? It is like a foundation of how we approach OCD in the home. And so instead of being reactive, which causes chaos and stress in the family, we're proactive and we learn how to address OCD. We have proactive plans on how we're going to handle compulsion seeking, reassurance seeking, OCD demands, OCD meltdowns, all of that. There is a response in place. It's almost like having, a fire drill, like when you go to a hotel and it has a map of where you're supposed to go in case there's an emergency. We need that in our family. What is our response to these things? How do we respond? It doesn't mean that it's going to go smoothly. Let me not lie here. It will still be bumpy and chaotic and stressful, but having that proactive plan of this is what we do with OCD is stress reducing. The next one, and I'm just going to be going over how OCD involves us, and then after the break, I'm going to talk about what we can do about these things. OCD does not live in its bubble, and it creates our own triggers. And so I often say, maybe ad nauseum, that there are two journeys going on when we're dealing with OCD. There is our child's journey Our child has their journey with OCD that is independent from us. It is their own. It will go with them when they leave the home. It will go with them when they get old. It's their journey. We are part of their journey for a brief period of time, but long term, this is a solo journey, and we're not privy to all the things that are going on in that journey. You're not privy to all the intrusive thoughts your child is having. Most parents are only seeing the tip of the iceberg of what is happening in the mind of our kids with OCD. That's not to scare you, that's just a reality. You'll never know fully what they are experiencing or all their intrusive thoughts, or even all their compulsions, because a lot of them are mental and we're missing them, and that is okay. But it's their journey. We will help navigate them, and I'll talk about our journey now because that's our journey, right? So as parents, we have our own journey. What is it like to have a child that's diagnosed with OCD? That's our journey, right? Their journey is what is it like to be diagnosed with OCD? What am I supposed to do as a parent? I might grieve that this isn't what I thought it would be. I'm grieving that my child is struggling with certain things that other kids aren't struggling with. I'm grieving that we're not meeting milestones or developmental phases in the way that other kids are. I'm grieving that we're spending a lot of money on therapy, or I'm grieving that we can't find a therapist, or I'm grieving that they're homebound, or I'm grieving that this isn't the parenting journey that I wanted. Those are all valid, and those all require some grief period of time. There's also our own triggers. What if I have anxiety or OCD and I'm being triggered by my child's anxiety or OCD? That happens too. I have social anxiety, and when my kids are losing control in public because of their anxiety or OCD, whether they're afraid they're going to throw up, or my daughter, when she has anxiety attacks, she feels like she's going to faint and she looks like she's going to, those trigger my social anxiety, because that's at the core of my fear is I don't want to make a scene. I don't want to lose control. And so I'm not coming to that situation with a clear lens. I'm coming to that situation with my own lens. My lens has something extra on it. It's not clear. I'm seeing it through my own fears and my own triggers. And so as I try to show up and be an anchor for my child, I also have to recognize and honor the fact that I am dealing with my own struggles. None of us can be a blank slate. None of us can approach our kids with an empty, clear lens. It's clouded. And when we recognize it's clouded with biases, triggers, our own struggles, our own what ifs, our own fears, our own story around our parenting and whether it's being successful, quote unquote, or not, that clouds the lens. And that is okay because everybody has a smudgy lens. But do you know what it is? Because when you know what it is, you can address it, you can process it, and you can work through it. So acknowledgement is really important. And I think a lot of times we don't pause enough to say, what's clouding my lens related to being a pure anchor for my child with OCD? And there are other triggers too. A lot of times parents will say they have PTSD from the journey that they're on related to OCD. It can be horrific. Your child can, starve themselves. They can be homebound. They can be aggressive. They can be dysregulated. It's exhausting. And that can impact your own stress and your own triggers. So when they get better, there's a lot of fear of anticipatory relapse. Well, what if it goes back? Or they have a hiccup or they hit a bump and then you're like, oh my gosh, we're going to go back to zero. And these are all things that impact the environment, because when we are anxious and fearful about those things, we show up to the situation with that energy, and that gets thrown in the mix, which can impact our effectiveness in being an anchor for our kids. We all have these things. I just want to reiterate that because I don't want you to be like, oh my gosh, I'm messing everything up. We all have this. I have this. You have this. We all have these. It's the acknowledgement and doing our own work that I'm really trying to stress. We have a journey. Our journey is possibly starting with grief when we get the diagnosis or when we acknowledge our child has OCD. And then our journey continues with education and figuring out what resources do I need to get to my child. And then, oh, my child doesn't want those resources. Now I have to deal with a barrier of my child refusing therapy or refusing the skills I want to teach them. So now my journey is how to motivate and encourage and build trust and communication with my child while I see them flail, which is super hard to do. And then my journey is how do I take care of myself during this? And my journey is how do I manage all the other people I have in my life? Because it's not just my child. I have a relationship maybe with a partner. I have a relationship with my other kids if I have them. I have a relationship with my friends. I have a relationship with my workers, my coworkers. I have a relationship with myself. Are those relationships falling apart because I am solely focused on my child with OCD? That's part of our journey. And then my journey might be, okay, I need to be a coach for my child. Or maybe I have to do these things at home. I have to pull back my own involvement in their OCD. How do I do that? What does it look like? These are all on our journey, not theirs. Can we lean over the journey line and get into their journey and say, you're not going to do these compulsions that don't involve us at all? No. We have limited say in some of the things that are in their lane, and we have to know our role. And that's hard sometimes to know which is our role and which isn't. Sometimes parents don't own enough of the journey, and sometimes they own too much of it. Which one are you? Where are you? Maybe in the middle, right? Sometimes parents throw their hands up and they say, you know what? This is for the therapist. I'm not touching this, doing this, coaching this. I'm not doing anything. I need a professional. And yes, it is fantastic to have an OCD therapist or even a space therapist. A space-trained therapist is someone who works with you on systematically pulling back your involvement with OCD. They don't need a child to be involved in therapy for that. That's fantastic. Go to spacetreatment.net. Look at the provider list. But ultimately, whether you get support or not, you're the one holding the fort down. You're the one getting impacted, and you're the one who's going to be there for your child in the thick of things at, 10 o'clock at night, or on the weekend when they won't go to that party, or they're stuck in the bathroom. Ultimately, it will fall on us. And so unlike a heart condition where my child needs to see a cardiologist, I'm not touching that, right? We'll take her to the cardiologist. And when the cardiologist says, do this, this, and this, we're going to do that, and that's it. I'm not getting in that lane, but this is different. Mental health in general is different, but OCD in particular is even more different because it will make you part of the disorder. And so we have to do our part. And unfortunately, not all therapists are skilled in understanding how to treat OCD. Therefore, you have to know enough to be able to spot a helpful versus unhelpful therapist. And that's unfortunate because if I had to do that for cardiology, that'd be a problem because I don't know what a good cardiologist, I could look at reviews, but that's all I got. Unfortunately, with OCD, you have to know what is the language a therapist should be saying, what things should they be communicating, what modalities should they be using. And so that can take a toll on our own mental health. And sometimes we can feel like a case manager because we're going from therapy to therapy, different therapist to therapist, different psychiatrist to psychiatrist, and hitting walls where maybe it's not covered by insurance, or if you are, getting government assistance, you're not finding the right kind of help. Or even if you're private pay, you're finding therapists who sounded good on paper, then you go in the office and you're like, nope, that's not a good fit. And you don't want a bad fit with OCD because if you have a bad fit, they can actually do more damage. And that's unfortunate because it's one of the few disorders that I feel like with the wrong modality can actually increase the OCD behaviors and thoughts. That's super annoying. So after the break, I want to talk about where do we start with this? Where do you go? I just listed all the reasons why the family needs to be involved. I think that's a pretty easy sell, right? That's not rocket science. But let's slow it down now and talk about what do you do, right? Because it's just one small step at a time. You're not going to take all this on at once. But let's talk about it. Just lost my voice for a second. After the break.
It's time we put help directly in our kids' hands. Introducing Crushing OCD course for kids and teens.
It was way more helpful than all the other therapy we've ever done because we didn't really know what to do. So we weren't really doing it before. So the course helped to figure out what the exposures are and how to do them.
We're not in therapy and find it really hard to find an ERP trained therapist here. So we're currently with like the public health service, but again, they don't seem to be trained in ERP. It's filled that gap that we don't have that was needed.
This was really well timed for us to use between therapists and to help us get off to a good start with this new practice.
It was easy to use. I was able to do it from my phone or also on the computer.
There's different ages, so there were younger kids, there were teenagers, and so that was really nice too, to have a variety of ages where it wasn't just geared towards younger kids or older kids. It was a nice variety.
It's helpful for our kids to hear it from this third party as opposed to just us saying it.
I really like the offense and defense method. I love working on poking at OCD while it's sleeping. It makes it a little bit easier to do, and it's kind of fun. I'm planning on using it to work on my fear of holding or touching batteries and stuff like that.
So it was really helpful, and I think a lot of other kids would like it. I thought that I was the only one who had worrying about the weather and stuff. And then there was somebody else on there who worried about the same thing, which was really helpful.
Seems less scary to work on stuff now that I've watched this class, and I'm more interested to work on it.
I like trying to do more exposures still, and before I wasn't, I just didn't want to do them.
I've worked on some of my bigger compulsions and been successful.
I realized that it was helpful to do the exposures. Before it was really, really hard. It's still hard, but it's helpful to know that I need to do them.
Before there would be a lot of battles about it. So it is definitely less loggerheads.
Really, really good course and super helpful.
Definitely would recommend this. It's really easy to follow. It's nice bite-sized videos. I really like the worksheets that go along with it, and I think it's really helpful.
To learn more about this course and register your child or teen, go to atparentingsurvivalschool.com.
Welcome back. So in the beginning half of this podcast episode, we talked about all the reasons why family involvement is so important. I mean, it really, the tentacles of OCD is so vast, and it impacts us on so many levels that, of course, we have to be involved in our kids' OCD treatment. I think it's important to say that the majority of therapists are not going to involve you. Now, there are gems out there who absolutely involve the parent, but more often than not, what I hear from AT parenting community members is the therapist is not involving me. And I mean, I am so much on my soapbox about family involvement. You need to help the parents as well, as much as the child. But I also want you to know that it's not a sign that you have a bad OCD therapist, because a lot of parents will join my community and then they'll say, this therapist was horrible. They didn't involve me. And unfortunately, that doesn't mean they're a horrible OCD therapist. It just is unfortunate that that is often how treatment is provided. And not just in OCD, but in other therapy issues as well. And when you look at different countries, there are different reasons for that. I was talking to a bunch of Australian therapists, and they said they're only given a certain amount of approved sessions. And so they have to use them on the child because they only have a finite amount of time with that child. I didn't know that. That was interesting to hear. And so that can impact families in different countries. But also in the States, more often than not, you're not going to have a therapist involving you. That doesn't mean that you can't try and that you can say, I'd like to be involved, or I want to have a parent session first, and I want to talk about how we're going to communicate and how I'm going to get support for what I'm supposed to do when my child is wanting me to complete a compulsion or is reassurance seeking what my response should be. Some therapists are really great at adapting, and there are lots of therapists who automatically do this as part of their practice, especially the pediatric OCD therapists. I think pediatric OCD therapists, when that's all you do is work with kids, you're much more likely to get that you need to work with the whole family. When you have a general OCD therapist who dabbles in, okay, yeah, I'll see kids as well, their approach might be more adult oriented, and so they're not used to maybe bringing in family. not everybody. I mean, there are a lot of therapists that think of the whole system, but I want to normalize the fact that it may not be that way, and that doesn't mean it's a bad OCD therapist. It means that you might reach out and say, can we have a parent-only session? How can I communicate with you? Can we do parent sessions once in a while? Can I even be in the sessions? I know when my practice was open, I closed it 3.5 years ago after my husband died. But prior to that, I always liked parents in the session unless they were a teenager and talking about sexually taboo topics and they didn't want their parent in there. It became a case-by-case decision as they got older. But for me, OCD, it's like a skill that I'm teaching. It's a training. I almost felt like I was a teacher versus a therapist. I'm not having them lay on the couch and talk about their childhood or, like their struggles. It's an approach you're teaching, and it's a very skill-based approach. And the parent is the one that's going to have to really babysit that, understand, why is my child doing this? What my role is? Do I tell them to do their ERP? What does that look like? And so having that discussed initially, I think with the therapist is really helpful. My kids are both in therapy, and they have been in therapy like their whole lives. And even though I feel like they have really good therapists now who are really skilled with OCD, which they didn't have in the past, so they don't really need my involvement as much. But I really, really appreciate that the therapists have an easy portal where I can communicate with them. And so if we had a rough patch, I can email them and just update them. Hey, this is what happened. These are the themes that we're dealing with right now, so that I can convey that to them before a session. And sometimes they pull me in at the end and they let me know what is going on, or they'll reach out to me and say, do you want a parent session? I feel like at this point, I don't need that as much. I have a pretty good pulse on what's happening, and I know my role, and I'm okay. But what I do appreciate is that there's a willingness for them to do that. And so it may be that you just have to ask the therapist, and they may say no. I know in different states and different countries, there are different confidentiality rules. And there are some therapists that just feel like therapy is a private relationship between them and the client. To me, honestly, that boggles my mind, because OCD is not a private issue. It's a family issue. But all I'm saying is that you might have to advocate a little bit about family. And even if you have a great OCD therapist and they're not wanting to involve you as a family member, it may still be worth you seeing or having your child see that OCD therapist, because they're a unicorn. They're really hard to find. And so that might be the best that you can do. You can't really shop around when there's only a handful of OCD specialists in any particular area, if that. So there are a lot of other things, though, that you can do on your own. And this is really the heart of what I do, is I try to fill in the gaps for you as a parent and connect you to education firsthand so that you can do your thing while your child is getting the help that they need. Now, a lot of kids aren't getting the help they need because you can't find help or they're not willing to go to a therapist. That doesn't mean that everything goes, to a screeching halt. There's so much still that you could be doing. There's so much still that they can be doing. And so it's just a matter of, where are you starting? What is your current goal? So education is key. I talk so much about educating yourself. I have a course, How to Teach Kids to Crush OCD. And even when people have been in, on this OCD journey for years and years, I'll still say, take it anyway. AT Parenting Community members get that course for free. And whenever they join AT Parenting Community, I'm always like, the first step is take that course, because there might be things that you don't know. And inevitably, most parents will write to me in the forums in our community and they'll say, I had no idea that was OCD, or I had no idea I shouldn't approach OCD in that way. There's always some education. So education is key. Read a book, take a course, listen to podcasts, do what you're doing, because knowing how OCD shows up, the multitude of ways it shows up, will help, because you'll know, one, when your child maybe has a different theme, you might notice it. Two, you might notice it when they're involving you because you have been educated. And three, you'll also know what the appropriate responses are and what kind of treatment you should look for. So education is really important. I think support as well is so important. This is not a journey for the lighthearted. It's a really, really rough and isolated journey. And it doesn't have to be isolated. It might be rough. That part we can't always control, but it doesn't have to be isolated. And so if you could get your own support, that is key. And what that looks like. So it might mean you get a space-trained therapist who only supports you if your child is not able to go to therapy or not willing or able to. Or your child is in therapy, but you want your own therapist to help guide you on what you should be doing to detangle yourself from OCD. It might mean you go see your own therapist for your own issues. A lot of times we think we don't have time for that because we need to be focusing on our kids. But the more we work on ourselves and the more improvement we focus on ourselves, the better we are to support our kids. And I learned that firsthand when my husband died, and I had no choice but to fully focus on myself because I was so not okay. And I continued working on myself way after the grief fog lifted because I realized I have neglected myself my entire life. And so there was this new awareness of self-improvement and self-love. I know it sounds so cheesy, but when I lost my husband, I was like, who am I without him? And I'm so afraid of living life alone. And that was a social anxiety issue. It was my core fear was I'm afraid I'm going to be alone. And then the reality was I was alone. I had my kids, but I was alone. And so I worked on myself. And the weird thing is, as I went on this journey to heal myself and then actually feel empowered to be alone and be by myself, I showed up so much better for my kids. The better I got, the healthier I became mentally, the better anchor I was for my kids because I was calmer, I was in a better space, I was not as triggered because my social anxiety was getting better. In my memoir, I did actually write an epilogue about his death and the struggle that I had with my social anxiety after he died because my core fear, anyone would have a hard time, but because my core fear has always been the fear of being alone, which I think a lot of our kids have that fear too, of just doing things alone, being on your own. It's such a vulnerable, naked feeling. And that really came to reality because I didn't have any friends or family. My family's all over the country and I had no friends. I was just all in with my husband. We were just, that was it. So taking care of our own mental health is huge. It's not a small little thing. It is huge because we learn, how do we handle stress? How do I want to show up in this moment? How do I want to be intentional? For me, just even focusing on the day-to-day and not learning for myself how to not live in the what if sea of angst, which really turned up high volume after my husband died. The what ifs would wake me up in the middle of the night. For my own struggles, oh my gosh, what, basic things, what if we have a leak in the backyard? What am I going to do? What if I get a flat tire and I only have one car? Who am I going to call? All these scenarios my brain was presenting to me nonstop. And so I had to learn how to live in the moment because I couldn't handle living outside of the moment during that period of time. But what I found inadvertently is that when I was in the moment for survival and I was oh, I'm really enjoying my breakfast. And then after my breakfast, I'm going to go and do the laundry. And after the laundry, I'm going to go pick up the kids. I had to live moment by moment and almost curate my day. You're Natasha, now you're going to do this. And now you're going to do this. With everything I did had intention. Now you're fully focusing on this meal. Now you're fully focusing on going and picking up your kid. To the point where I had to leave sticky notes to remember to pick them up because I got so in the moment that sometimes I would forget to preview the next moment because my brain wasn't doing well anyway. Luckily, I'm much better, but my brain hasn't fully come back and it may never come back. I think that's just what grief does. But when I was learning how to be mindful and really be in the moment, it impacted my parenting. Because when my brain wanted to spin out of control and say, oh my gosh, the OCD's back. Oh my gosh, she's having anxiety attacks and she's going to not be able to go to school anymore. It was so easy for me to hear those thoughts as foreign because I got so used to training my brain to being in the moment. And so I was nope, we're right here in this moment. okay, she's having an anxiety attack right now. That's the only moment I need to focus on. It's not that, I need to worry about what's going to happen in 4 months when she goes back to school. I'm only focusing on this moment. And so working on yourself, this is my whole message to you, is that working on yourself is powerful, and that is supporting your kids. So you can come up with a plan. And I normally tell AT parenting community members, I say, pick one goal for yourself and one goal for your kids. And so, and that goal for your child is not what they are going to be doing. It's what you're going to be doing with them. So for instance, my personal goal right now is to learn more, ironically, about ADHD. My son was just recently diagnosed with ADHD, although he's obviously had it his whole life. And he is in online school right now. And so we are home together 24/7. And I feel like I'm managing a lot. And I want to read more books on ADHD and really get into that. And so my goal right now is to learn more and educate myself on ADHD. That's my goal. My goal with him is to respond to him with patience and compassion, because often that doesn't happen. And so you can see I have two goals, right? I'm like educating myself, that's separate from my son. It doesn't involve him. And then my goal around my child. And so think about what that might be for you, because it's very easy to get a big view of all the things that you want to do, or all the things you need to do, or all the things that you're doing wrong. Very easy to get into that mode. But what I want you to get from this episode is, what's one goal that I'm working on for myself? And that actually may not be related to your child at all. I have goals for myself too. Like my goal is still, I need to get back into living in the moment. Kind of lost it for the last, 4 or 5 months. I was working with a coach, just like a mindset coach. And then she retired, and that really bummed me out, because it was kind of like an every other week anchor to be like, oh, this is a reminder for me. And I think that's kind of why I've lost my way a little bit. So I have a personal goal, a personal growth goal. Like I really want to get back in touch with like focusing in the moment more, because there was so much happiness when I really enjoyed, like, I'm here petting my dog and I'm really enjoying this. I'm here doing the laundry and I'm listening to a podcast. I'm really enjoying this. There was like little gratitudes throughout my day. I've kind of lost that. So that is actually a growth goal I have. But there is a goal for me related to my kids as far as education, and then related to how I'm going to interact with them. Maybe you can think about your goals. Do you have a goal for yourself unrelated to your kids that you want to do, and not something you should do, like I need to eat healthier or I need to exercise? Maybe those are true, but not as shoulds, right? Just something that is going to bring you peace and growth in a way that feels good. And maybe if that does feel good, then do it in a good way. Not like I should do this and I should do that. And then one goal for your child. And you can't pick a goal that you have no control over. Stay in your lane, right? You're in your journey, they're in their journey. So a goal might be, I want to approach them in this way, or I want to build trust in this way, or when they do this, I will do this, right? It can't be they are going to reduce their shower length of time. That's not your goal. That's their goal. What are you going to do to support them with that, right? There might be a component that you're going to be involved in, but it can't be something that you can't control. So I hope that you found this helpful. I know that it can be really hard when we're dealing with our kids with OCD, and the journey that we're going on can feel really hard and lonely. The AT parenting community is not open right now, but it will open its doors. Let me look at when this is coming. We're in September. I record these way ahead of time. So I'm like way ahead. I'm actually August 19th right now. I'm super ahead. But this will be that week. And you can get on the wait list at atparentingcommunity.com. We often do a wait list opening for people in between our public openings. And so that one might be coming up because we are in between. We don't open up the doors again. I'm looking at when we open them up. Yeah, we're not going to open them up again until November, but more likely than not, we will do a private waitlist opening. in between there, which could be pretty soon. So get on the wait list at atparentingcommunity.com. It might be very, very soon, because we normally watch that list and then open it up when it gets too big. And it normally gets too big at least 2 months before we open up. So check that out. If you are enjoying the podcast, don't forget to hit a star and rate the podcast. I do appreciate that. And don't forget the memoir. If you want to get that free social anxiety course, that would be awesome. socialanxietyreality.com. I hope that you find the sparkle in everything you do, and I'll talk to you again next Tuesday. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the AT Parenting Survival Podcast. To get additional support raising a child with anxiety or OCD, visit Natasha's online school of on-demand classes at atparentingsurvivalschool.com.